They told her marriage was the happiest day of her life. But they didn't tell her it would be the day she legally ceased to exist. No, this isn't fiction. This is what being a wife meant in the Victorian era. Once married, a woman's money, property, body, even her children belonged to her husband. And if he hurt her, the law turned a blind eye. So if you think Victorian marriage was romantic, you're about to see just how wrong that idea really is. Because behind the veils and vows was a truth so dark, it still echoes today. In Victorian England, marriage wasn't the start of a love story, it was the end of a woman's independence. For upper-class families, marriage was a business deal. Daughters were traded like assets. The goal, land, titles, wealth, and alliances. Feelings didn't matter. Inheritance did. For middle-class families, marriage meant respectability. And for the poor, it meant survival. A woman without a husband had no status, no security, and no protection. Worse, she had no value in the eyes of society. From the moment a woman got married, the law treated her as a non-person. The system of coverture absorbed her identity into her husband's. She couldn't own property, sign a contract, or even keep her wages. And no, this wasn't a loophole. It was the law. If she inherited land, it became her husband's. If she wrote a novel and earned royalties, he took the money. If he wanted to spend it all at the bar, he could. And if she objected, she had no legal voice. Now imagine living in a world where your husband could legally beat you, and it was considered a private domestic issue, not a crime. In 1857, England passed the Matrimonial Causes Act. It allowed for divorce, but only just. A man could divorce his wife for adultery. A woman? She had to prove adultery plus cruelty, incest, or abandonment. And if she succeeded, she'd likely lose her children, her home, and her reputation. Divorce meant public shame. Women were humiliated in the press and ruined socially. Many preferred to stay in abusive marriages just to avoid disgrace. Meanwhile, inside the home, life wasn't easy. The ideal Victorian wife was pure, passive, and domestic. She had to be the caretaker, the cook, the cleaner, the nurse, the educator, and the childbearer. She was expected to give birth repeatedly, often without proper medical care. Many women died in childbirth. Many more lost their children to disease. There was no birth control. There was no rest. There was only duty. And yet, women were told to be grateful. Grateful for being chosen. Grateful for being married. Grateful for being legally owned. Sex wasn't discussed openly, but behind closed doors, it was another realm where consent didn't matter. Marital rape wasn't recognized as a crime until 1991 in the UK. That's not Victorian history. That's living memory. And if you think these conditions were limited to poor women, think again. Upper-class women were expected to manage the home, host guests, bear heirs, and remain quiet. They couldn't vote. They couldn't study in universities. They were dressed in corsets and silks, but still prisoners. Middle-class women had it no better. Their role was defined entirely by their husband's career and social standing. They often faced financial insecurity, limited social mobility, and no chance of personal ambition. Poor women? They worked as maids, seamstresses, or factory workers during the day, and as unpaid wives and mothers at night. And still, the pressure to marry was intense. Single women were labeled spinsters or old maids, socially shunned, pitied, and laughed at. But even in the darkest systems, resistance finds its way in. Some women began to speak out. Caroline Norton was one of them. After escaping an abusive marriage, she campaigned for women's rights. Her fight led to the Married Women's Property Acts, allowing wives to legally own their earnings and property for the first time in 1870 and 1882. Then came suffragettes, brave, relentless women who demanded change. They chained themselves to gates. They smashed windows. They were arrested and force-fed in prisons. And still, they marched. Women like Millicent Fawcett and Emmeline Pankhurst paved the road toward legal reforms, bodily autonomy, and the right to vote. Bit by bit, law by law, the stranglehold of Victorian marriage began to loosen. But don't be fooled. Many of its ghosts are still with us. The pressure to marry early, the judgment of women who don't want kids, the stigma of divorce, the myth of the perfect wife. We've changed the laws, yes, but the mindset? That's harder to break. We still live in a world that rewards women for being pleasing, not powerful. And while the cages may no longer be made of law, they still exist in expectations, culture, and silence. So if this story moved you, disturbed you, or made you think differently, share it. Because too many people still believe the past was simpler or better. But they forget who paid the price for that simplicity. And if you want more forgotten truths, more untold histories, and more voices that were never meant to be heard, hit that subscribe button. We don't just tell history. We reveal the parts that were buried. And together we remember, so we never go back.